things off, uh, I'm I'm Chris Satiro, and I lead key accounts here for TMP. Been working in this industry for about 12 years now, and I'm here to talk to you today about how to maximize your recruitment marketing budget. And there's a lot of information to cover, and I'm going to go through some things at a pretty high level. But the way to look at this presentation is it's sort of like the secret recipe for the things that you can do that you hadn't maybe thought of doing, to help your marketing efforts along the way. And while I go through a lot of this at a high level, there's a lot of material that'll definitely could be webinar material on its own. But I think what I do want everybody to get out of this is just a new way of looking at tackling some of your recruitment marketing challenges, some new infrastructure you can follow. And so you can see I got these items listed out here, and I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in. And I think really to start, I think in today's climate, it's definitely becoming more and more difficult to recruit. Competition is at its highest level. Depending on the types of roles that you're hiring for, it's going to be really hard to find some of the talent that you want. And when you just look at the labor forces behind all of this, it really has a lot to do with what we're seeing from an overall economic standpoint. So unemployment rate is at its lowest, and if you look at what's happened in 2018, it was the first time that the job open rate actually surpassed the unemployment rate. And I think, if we think about it, everybody's starting to feel it. And we're seeing that higher competition, that in turn is making it more expensive to advertise. Places like Indeed aren't as cheap as they used to be. The cost per click has been going up. There's also a lot more fire drills, a lot more people forced into reactive positions. Looking at candidate pools, lots of clients right now are having to settle for less quality candidates based on the job market. And in turn, with all of this competition, retention rates are going down because people are leaving to go to other employers that are, winning them over with higher salaries, better benefits, all sorts of things. So when we keep all of that in mind, I think one of the things I see most commonly just being in this space is, when these things do get tough, we even on the TMP side get it a lot. Hey, where else can I advertise my jobs? What other job boards are there out there? What sort of advertising are we not doing? But the problem with that approach is, it's a very short-term view of, solving a problem of we need more candidates. And, you can choose as an organization to sort of live in that position, and that you may be able to get by. But in doing so, you're probably going to spend a lot more money than you need to, and you're really going to have a lot of problems go unnoticed, because needing more candidates isn't always the best solution to your recruiting problems. And I think taking that more long-term strategic approach is where I think a lot of organizations who are feeling less of the pain during this current recruiting climate, they've taken years of planning and have put some things into place that has set themselves up for success. And really it also starts with having your goals. So any strategy, you need to have goals and objectives, and then your strategic recruitment marketing roadmap should be aligned to those goals and work towards those. And that gets you out of this reactive short-term firefighting reality that a lot of organizations are dealing with from a recruiting perspective. All right. So when you take a look at the long term versus the short term and building your goals, you also have to take the bigger and larger view of what the hiring cycle looks like. So we have to consider what the candidate themselves actually go through. And It starts with them being aware, they consider you, they may become interested in you, they may apply. Recruiters are then selecting, screening, assessing, hiring managers interview, they get hired and they're onboarded. Now, the key thing to remember is that some of these elements are owned by marketing or recruitment marketing or however it functions in your organization. And then there's a lot, there's usually multiple teams involved. But the reality is if you're not connecting the dots in these right points, or if you have problem areas in, some of these steps that a candidate goes through, you can have disconnects. You can lose out on candidates. You can certainly waste money. And, it's really taking this holistic look at what the entire hiring cycle is throughout that candidate's journey. And you want to make sure it's consistent. You don't want the recruiters in the bottom areas of the funnel to not live up to the messages of your marketing. You don't want the onboarding experience to fall flat when you got the candidates excited. So, you have to understand how all of those things work together. And the reality is, if your strategy is incomplete, you will always be plugging holes. And that's the short-term firefighting that I'm talking about. And I think the reality of a lot of companies right now is this is sort of what's happening. You need more candidates, so you pour more water in the bucket. And then along the way, you're trying to patch the different holes. So what I'm going to talk to you guys today about is how do you, what are different ways that you can transform your organization from a company that is acting like this, plugging holes in your existing bucket, and how do you build a new bucket? How do you build a new bucket based on your goals? Where do you want to be? How do you measure the effectiveness of the bucket? That it becomes easy to measure when you go from a bucket with holes in it, and then you start to see what the bucket without holes in it actually looks like. And at the very end, I'm going to share some results with you guys from one of my key accounts I work on here at TMP, and just sort of their results from taking a more holistic approach. So, how do you measure the effectiveness of your recruitment marketing efforts? I think that's a big question a lot of people have too, and I think it's a really important one. And what I'm going to show you right now is a very simple formula, and I think it's just a different way of thinking of things too. And you'll notice here that I call it a marketing cost per hire, and we can look at this as like, what's the operational efficiency of the bucket, that we were just talking about that has everything in there. And it's your total recruitment marketing expenses. It's your total external hires, and it's what is your marketing cost per hire. Now, that's a simple equation, but you have to sort of take the look of like, well, what goes all into your recruitment marketing budget? So I think even here at TMP, I think we share a lot of data with our clients on media performance or advertising performance, and that's performance related to the ads you buy. And that's important, but that's only one small piece of what your recruitment marketing budget entails. And as we go through, it's one small piece of actually how you can leverage recruitment marketing. But you have things like your site, your career site. It could be tools and technology that you introduce into your process, such as video interviewing. It could be what you invest in creative projects, building a brand or EVP. Depending on how your organization is leveraged, if you utilize TMP to act as an extension of your HR marketing team, it may be what you pay TMP for those retained resources. Or it could be if you have an in-house team and, however you're doing that, it might be just those internal resources focused on marketing. And you could kind of see here, you want to take the sum of anything that would be the purpose of using marketing to recruit, and make sure you have all those expenses cared for. Now, when building this budget, and I know we probably have varying levels of folks on the call, and you could be making a business case for your budget, or you might own the budget and you may be just trying to determine what that is. But I think you need to understand where you are first. Like, what is your marketing cost per hire today? And if you don't know that, I encourage you guys to find that out. and then see how you can benchmark that against the industry. There's definitely some studies that have been done out there and some information that we can share here at TMP around that. So when you're determining the appropriate budget, you're going to have to look at and consider what type of roles you're hiring for, right? If you're in a shop that has mostly high volume hiring, you expect that cost to be a little bit lower. If your organization's going through trends where your hiring is now shifting gears to more specialized professional roles, you're going to have to set the expectation that it's going to cost a little bit more from a marketing perspective to be successful in hiring those type of candidates. You want to keep in mind what your hiring forecast looks like. You don't want to be surprised midway through the year that your hiring either went way up or went way down. I mean, can't always control it. Hiring is volatile, but it's definitely good to consider that. And really, like, what is a good target marketing CPH you're striving for? Do you feel like you're, to use the bucket analogy, do you feel that your bucket has a lot of holes right now and we're at a place where it really needs to improve? Or are you at a place too where you're in a building phase? You're going to need to invest a little bit more upfront in order to build that better bucket, so you understand going into that year that your marketing expenses may be a little bit higher. So, those are all things to consider. And I'm just going to show you guys a snapshot. This is sample data, but I've used this as a way to sort of measure the effectiveness of your overall recruitment marketing efforts. So, back to what I was saying about total spend, let's just say you spent $740,000 for 1,345 hires. Your marketing cost per hire is $550. Usually, you want to keep in mind trends of recs. Looking at this year over year, how's it trending? Where's your apt to hire ratio? Or sometimes I like to look at that as what is your recruiter utilization ratio? Because sometimes organizations have very high apt to hire ratios because their recruiters aren't getting to all the candidates. Or it could be that you might just be a very desirable brand that has a lot of people interested in you. All kinds of variables there, but the two metrics that I usually like to point to as far as how well your bucket is operating is the cost per hire and the apt to hire ratio. So, I think one of the things that I'm sure a lot of you joined this webinar for was so how can I actually do this? How can I make my recruitment marketing budget work harder? One of the key points that I'll make is, and I think it's a common theme, and I'm going to go through all kinds of ways you can do this, but the best way to do this a lot of times is to reduce your dependency on paid advertising and media through a holistic recruitment marketing mix. So, what that means is you might be spending a lot of money on Indeed today because it's a very popular job source and it helps fill your pipelines. But there's other ways to do the same thing that may not involve spending that money. And I have evidence, like I said, with one of my key accounts and how we, over the period of 5 years had made that transition into doing that. So I showed you guys the hiring cycle. I talked about how you need to have goals. I mean, you really need to have those things first. But when we look at, what makes up a holistic recruitment marketing mix, it's several things. And I've teed this up sort of in just sort of questions that, simple questions that you can ask. And like I alluded to before, a lot of folks I know, even when they go to TMP, they think of us solely as their media managers or their website builders. But, it's a lot bigger than just the work that goes into deploying advertising and having a website for your advertising to land. It really is much bigger than that. And I'm going to go through the details on some of this, but you really have to think of, what do candidates think of you? And, that's your employer brand. It is what candidates think of you. When it comes to media, I mean, media is important. It's not the only thing, but you have to think of how well you're doing that overall. From an employee activation standpoint, some companies do this well, and some companies have the opportunity to start doing this. Employees can be a very valuable recruiting tool. Candidate experience, how well is that journey managed? And then, one of them that I know is getting a little bit more hot, at least in the industry, when you look at everybody wanting to start adapting CRMs, it's really just how well are you nurturing your leads and data. So I've put some simple bullet points here. Like I said, I'm going to run through them all, but these are some of the things within those buckets that make up what a holistic recruitment marketing mix is. And it's going to be different based on your company and what you're trying to achieve. And these are a list of tactics, right? But when you sort of marry together your goals, the marketing mix that you have deployed, while considering everything that's happening across the hiring cycle or hiring continuum, you're going to find more effective recruitment and hiring outcomes. So to kick things off with the employer brand, there's this is some companies have such good have very strong consumer brands that are so well connected to their employer brands that they get tons of candidates no matter what. I mean, one of the obvious ones that comes to mind is Google. And what you won't see Google doing a whole lot of is advertising on Indeed and other places like that, because they've built such a strong employer brand that they don't need to. And when you are building your employer brand, there's really three different things we focus on at TMP when doing it. And, identifying your employee value proposition, it's sort of marrying together what do people think of you now, how satisfied are your current employees, and then aspirationally, where do you want to go as a company. And I think all three of those areas are important, because if you over rotate in any one of those areas, you'll find that there could be some negative impacts from a recruiting perspective. For example, if you're so focused on where your company is headed and who you want to be, you can develop a brand for yourself that looks incredible in all of the creative and advertising work that you may have somebody do for you, and it may attract a lot of people. However, if that does not align with the realities of working at your company, you're going to have big retention issues. So, you really need to focus on how all those three things do there. And, we have years of expertise in helping clients with that. And, we have plenty of case studies and things of that nature that, we can share. So, once you have sort of that foundation or some variation of it, right? Like, not everybody's going to have the ability to do full-on research projects to build an EVP, but getting to a point where you at least feel like you can balance those three blocks in your messaging, you're going to want to make sure that you develop a cohesive creative campaign. So you don't want the creative to just be in one area of the candidate journey. You want to adapt it to all areas and make sure it's consistent throughout so that you are properly expanding yourself to the right audiences. So, having a strong brand, at least starting right away, is going to help you reduce some of the cost causers, like wasting your recruiter's time for candidates who were misled, attracting the wrong fit candidates. So all that's about honing that message. And then when you deploy that message, you do need to make sure that it's as cohesive as possible. Now, another thing that I think is very important on this employer brand front is content marketing. And I want to be careful to not get this confused with social media. And I know for a while in the industry, everyone's like, we got to do social recruiting. We got to do social. I need a social media page. But that's not necessarily what I would say is the best way to think of it. That's more, social media is a channel. That's all it is. But content marketing is basically adding authenticity to your brand messages. And it's doing so in a way and in a format that feels authentic and it feels real. So for those of you out there who are not doing this today, it's definitely something you should probably look into. And for those that do, you've probably started to see how aligning the right content with the right audiences is a valuable tool because you don't have to sell as hard. You have the facts, you have the validation. And think of this as the validation to what you say. It's sort of showing versus telling. A lot of companies, especially career sites, are corporate speak telling candidates things. So, you can have the great creative campaign, but it will be only stronger if you can back it with real content. So, I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about media management and how well you reach candidates. And I mean, your management of the media is definitely the more efficient you can be with that, for sure, it's going to help with your budget. But I think it really starts with strategic data measurement. So yes, we have campaign management here at TMP that we use to track and purchase all of our media, and using that data to drive your media purchase decisions is very valuable. And I would say it's equally as important to benchmark against your own data. For years and years, one of the ways I've helped add value for clients is we hold media accountable to what that client's data is. So if your cost per application was normally, let's say, $10, and you have a media contract or a media agreement where they're delivering value at $20, well, that's not a good alignment based on what we can get. And, your options are to no longer use that media, or see if you guys can meet in the middle and they can align better with your value. And doing that sort of helps you build a stronger media portfolio that, does give you savings. Like $20,000 you save on a media contract could potentially be put into a strategic project and reinvested. So, I can't understate the importance of really getting a hold of your own data and making sure that you manage whoever's in charge of whichever media to make sure that, you're getting the value that you need. It's also important to just understand the changes in job seeker behavior. I remember the turning point of job aggregators taking over from job boards. I mean, I remember looking at the media for my clients and seeing how much of those applications and hires were coming from the major job boards. But you start to spot the trends, and then you see, oh, well, job aggregators are really starting to take off. So doing that, by itself is a very important aspect of that, and it will help you get a more effective budget, and it can help you also reinvest into some other areas. So search engine optimization is another good way to not have to buy advertising, and luckily the Talent Brew platform automates this. So if you think about your traditional SEO or people out there who do search engine optimization for a living, a lot of these technical words you guys see here on screen are things that SEO experts focus on. But if you look at a traditional sense, what they would have to do is build web pages manually that align with web queries. What are people searching for? Well, Talent Brew platform automatically builds thousands of web pages every day based on your jobs. So if you have a retail job in San Francisco, California, Talent Brew creates a page for retail jobs, all of them. Then they create a page for retail jobs in San Francisco. Then they create a page for retail jobs in California. And that effect will make it so that your jobs are much more visible on search engines, and all of that traffic you're getting from people searching on Google organically is traffic that you didn't have to buy. And yes, you bought your Talent Brew, but that's why, earlier I said you have to look at your marketing efforts holistically. How is that affecting it? Your overall efficiencies. And another thing I've seen some savvier companies do, and we're doing this with AT&T right now, is we're actually building content that has nothing to do with jobs. So if you could just imagine, women in technology is a big initiative for many companies, but women don't actually search for jobs. Nobody goes out there and says jobs for women, right? Nobody does that. However, you might have somebody searching for women in tech scholarships. So one of the things we've been toying with is let's build a listicle article with that just points out the top women in tech scholarships for incoming students, and let's brand it. It'll be an AT&T branded article, and we're going to provide a useful resource for somebody actually doing research about a topic that the is aligns with that incoming college student and the AT&T brand, and they may through that think of AT&T's brand different. So engine optimization, I know it's not as trendy as it once was, at least from being spoken about, but it is very valuable as far as being able to drive traffic from Google and other search engines without having to pay for it. And that's sort of a big thing with that. And you can save a lot of money by having a strong search engine optimization in place. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about social media. So, I know a lot of people are like, I need a social media strategy and, everything else. But I think, I personally look at social media as a channel. And I think that it's important to look at social media in an impactful way. And what I mean by impactful way is, use it to its fullest ability. So if all you do is do a content calendar and put out social posts all the time, and you have no money to advertise on social media, do not use social media, because social media has mainly turned into a place for community engagement, and then B, a place for advertising. And if you don't have the resources for community engagement, and I know it's tough in the recruiting space, it's really hard to do that. So you're better off actually using it as a tool to leverage advanced targeting capabilities for brand advertising. So sometimes people will run radio ads in markets because it's brand advertising. It's a good way to reach people. But you're much better off doing social advertising instead of things like that, because you can reach that audience at scale and in a very effective way. Like, you can drill down to people that actually work in customer service roles in the markets you want and reach them directly. It's also just a way to authentically express your brand. So, compared to other mediums, it's going to be a lot more authentic. It does give you the ability to engage with candidates, from that community management perspective. We've had lots of Twitter chats and things like that have been successful for some clients. Recruiters should learn how to use it the right way. I'm not talking just posting pictures of flyers of the jobs they're hiring for, but actually networking and building with different people. And the last point that I really want to draw attention to is you cannot miss out on the power and the viral effect of getting your employee audiences to use social media on your behalf. So this is the employee well, we're going to talk a little bit about how to leverage your employees in a second, which will be a good transition. But social media is great from that standpoint. A lot of people get stuck on, I have to have a channel with my brand, but for a large client of mine, like AT&T, for example, their employee base drives more media impressions than we do from the brand channels. And it's because we mobilize them and used social media in an impactful way. So another thing, I know this is probably a hot topic in the industry right now, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but programmatic advertising, the way to look at that is buying ads more efficiently. So you should be using programmatic advertising if you have an opportunity to reduce media waste. It will allow you to make sure you focus only on the right jobs you need to focus on, the right markets, the right audiences, and it's the latest in advertising technology. And the reason it's so big is because it helps you buy media more efficiently. You no longer need to go directly to a bunch of sites to get contracts and buy media and things like that. So programmatic advertising, if you have big media purchases you're doing now, you may want to talk to somebody about this, because it's definitely something you can do to shave a lot of money off of your budget. All right, employee activation, and this ties a little bit to some of the things I was alluding to before with social media. So, your employees are actually a very valuable recruitment marketing resource. I mean, not only should they be understand your brand and can be good word of mouth um, engines for your brand, but you should let them help tell the stories that you want to tell, and do a lot of the recruiting heavy lifting for you. Um, Life at ATT is a good case study we have. I did a webinar last year with Jen Terry, and we did a deep dive on that topic. And they've been able to create a lot of media value, earned media value, as in media we didn't have to buy, by getting the employees to really work hard on social media, incentivizing them, authentically expressing what it's like to work at AT&T. And it's bigger than just social media too, right? If you have a brand and you want to add that authenticity to it, it always helps if you use your employees versus the same stock image that's out there on 10 different career sites now that everybody's using. So your employees also really enable you to differentiate yourself as well, because it's the real people who work for your organization. Beyond just having them be engines on social media, we have a lot of clients at TMP doing great work and lifting up impactful employee stories and using them as marketing materials. So you can see Lockheed has published a recent story recently that helps inspire their potential candidates who are looking to work in cybersecurity. P&G has been putting out a lot of employee content, and really have it well integrated throughout their entire career site. I talked about AT&T as well. They have a giant library of all sorts of articles for different initiatives. The one on the right was leveraged in a campaign for recruiting women in retail stores, and we took real examples of employees who were women in retail stores and built a story around it. So, beyond just trying to advertise on a job board that specializes in women, which that's a fake thing. Job boards do that to just get money. You got to take you can take a more authentic approach like this and get better recruiting outcomes. One of the biggest ways to leverage your employees, and if you think about it, what I talked about with having a hashtag that your employees get behind to share work-related content, the indirect effect of that is employee referrals, right? They may not be actually going out there and saying to all their people on social media, click this link and work here, but there's going to be that indirect effect of them showing up in their friends and family's feed and being like, oh, it looks like AT&T is a great place to work. I want to know more. But the reality is if you don't have an employee referral program, and if you do and you're not focused on building and evolving it, you should be, because employee referrals are generally the highest quality source of hire. I mean, in all the data I've seen on a client level, your employee referral app to hire ratio is always going to be way more efficient than your advertising app to hire ratio. And the more you're able to build your employee referrals, it's the less advertising you're going to need to buy. And if you have this in place, one of the things that we do for clients a lot of times too is when the recs open and they think it's going to be hard, and we may need to do a little bit of extra advertising or outreach or whatever because it's labor market conditions, what have you. Always make sure that you have some sort of formal communication going out about employee referrals. If you don't do this right now, you're definitely probably spending more money on advertising than you need to, or it's just costing you more to recruit. So employee referral programs are huge, and like one quick piece of advice I'd have, I mean, this is a big topic in itself, is don't worry so much about the fancy employee referral technology. Um, that's sort of the if you build it, they will come mentality. You could have the fanciest employee referral tool, but if nobody knows about it, it's a waste of money. So generally for my clients, we focus a lot more on internal communications plans and building awareness about employee referrals because let's be real, most of the tools are a little bit over engineered. I know you have to get people to pay payouts and things like that, but it at the end of the day, a lot of the data is just being entered by candidates into the ATS directly anyway, and you'll probably see better results by instead of investing in a fancy technology, actually investing in better ways to reach those employees. Another thing that's big on employee activation is managing your employer reputation proactively. I know a lot of people, especially some leaders, are scared of Glassdoor and scared of what it says out there. But the reality is candidates are going there. They're going to go there regardless of what you do. So you got to manage your reputation a little bit more proactively. Now, I would also be careful too because there's millions of review sites out there. If you look at the actual data, the fairy god bosses, the Comparablies, the Kanunus of the world are still very, very small in comparison to Glassdoor and Indeed. So I tend to focus on those guys, and I'm not worried about paying Comparably $20,000 just so they can make the rating higher because their audience is small. But you want to get there and have your profile branded, but you want to make sure you can leverage some of the internal communications among your employees to get the right employees to leave that feedback. Because you don't want your profile to be a place where only angry people go, because angry people are going to go there anyway. But how do you balance that with people who are the right culture fit? And so we've definitely for some clients, helped them identify which employee events we should use some sort of outreach to those groups. Like, is it an employee resource group conference? What are the places that make sense so we can get the right employees and get their engagement for leaving reviews? Like, we're not bribing anybody, but we're being a little bit more proactive in who's going there. And then, using it in your recruitment messages is key as well. Embedding Glassdoor reviews on your page. People are going to go there anyway. Why not make it easy for them? Put it directly on your career site. And I mean, I think, you can't worry about some of the cons, especially if the cons are true, because if you try to hide that, like I was talking about earlier in the hiring cycle, if you're too shiny bauble up front, you're going to have retention issues. And that means you're going to have to do more recruiting. And it means more reactive recruiting because when people leave, it wasn't planned. So I think that's a very important aspect, and it does take the employees' involvement in getting them to participate when it's the right employees, right? You will have flare-ups of negativity, and you can't control that, but what you can control is the alignment of the right employees leaving reviews. All right, I'm going to talk about candidate experience and the candidate journey, and this is a big chunky topic as well. But it's also a way that you can make your marketing dollars work that much harder for you if you have a good candidate experience. The worse your candidate experience is, the more you're going to have to invest in marketing, the more holes you're going to have to plug. So one of the good and effective ways to at least start with a candidate experience is when you do attract them and you do have their attention, is making sure you can personalize the experience to the fullest on the career site. So it means, if depending on the type of role, how do you build out an experience that's relevant to them, aligns to them, and helps them build their consideration as they're browsing your career site. And you can see in here, there's a few good examples of some companies who are using the Talent Brew platform to really personalize the experiences for their career audiences, right? It's not a generic one-stop shop for everyone, but how do you really communicate in the most effective way? And, this helps you waste less money or be more efficient with your money, because you're not losing people who may not draw the connection that there's a place for you within that company. They can see it. It's personalized to them. It makes it easier. Um, once they're in the door too, I mean, a lot of companies have all kinds of different jobs and all kinds of naming conventions and things like that. And sometimes it can be tricky to find a job. So, make sure that you're configuring and you're really focused on your job search experience. One of the things at TMP that we've done is we've built a pretty flexible job search experience, and it is flexible in that it gives you sort of the control to tweak it depending on how people search for you. I know a Disney example I commonly hear is that uh, there was a lot of people searching for princesses on the site. We had that data. Well, princess isn't usually a job function or a job category or even a job title. And if they went to Indeed, they might have trouble with princess. But we can actually monitor that type of activity on the back end of our sites, and we can make custom configurations to make sure that we map the right jobs to the way that people are searching to. Because if you worked really hard and you spent all this money and someone got to your site and they don't find what they want, um, you know, you lost out on that investment. Job descriptions. So I know job descriptions are pretty broken if you look across the board. They've a lot of people just copy and paste a lot of the same like general job descriptions that have been showing up on the web in the 90s, and um, you know there's a ton of ways that you can optimize your job descriptions, and it goes even beyond just rewriting the job description or looking at the job title. And like for TMP clients, we're seeing on average around 40% of candidates are only seeing the job description. That might be lower, depending on what you do. But if you buy more job ads, it's definitely going to be higher. So um, we have the ability to customize these experiences and really, take advantage of people when they're there, of the opportunity when they're there to figure out how to communicate to them. Um, Beyond that, I think the application process is huge. That's all the things that I just talked about along the candidate experience journey. Like you might have all those other things well put together, but by the time they get to the application process, it can all fall apart as well. Um, a lot of legacy ATSs have poor user interfaces. We at TMP have figured out some ways that we can make the user interface faces more robust. You are actually looking at a snapshot of Taleo right now. This is AT&T's Taleo powered by Talent Brew Apply. But we've been working with them for years on just figuring out how do we cut down the amount of fields we're asking candidates, how do we improve drop off, how do we make the login experience a little bit more intuitive, and all of this will pay dividends for you because you really want to get a sense of what your dropout rate is right now and how you can improve that, because sometimes you end up spending more on marketing because you're having more people fall out at this part of the process. And even after they finish their application, I think another thing where things could go wrong is that a lot of ATS correspondences are overly robotic, or they feel fake. Like robo rejections is a big one. I'd say if you have auto rejections happening almost instantly for candidates, you may want to put a couple day delay on that. You will really uh, not make good marks with a candidate if you reject them right away. They will automatically be like, how the heck could a recruiter look at me that fast? And they may carry a little bit of brand resentment with them. I'd say branding and rewriting your ATS communications is something you should definitely do. As often as people don't understand what the process is, these are good vehicles to remind candidates what the process is. You can use themes in your communications to get them to feel excited, or maybe reduce the blow a little bit if you had to reject them. So that's a good way for you to continue to make your marketing more efficient. And even outside of that, you really got to take a look at the recruiting team too. And I know for some people, you may be in an HR marketing role and your staffing delivery partners are your clients, but this is very important too. And you do want to look at that data, see where you're at, how long is your time to fill, what's going on with the actual process, because that will save you a lot of time and money if you can fix that problem as well. So that, candidate experience, I think, is a big part. Always a lot of work to happen there, but in all the examples I gave you, those are sort of areas where I think a lot of people have holes right now, and you may be plugging those holes at the moment, but it's definitely good to start focusing on how you can build just a better candidate experience in those cases. So I'm going to hit on the last topic here before I show you some of the AT&T information, but this is relationship marketing, and I know that CRMs are hot now, and people are really trying to take a look at what do I do with the data I already have, which is smart, which is what you should be doing. So I think some of the things that to focus on, at least, I'm not going to talk about fancy CRM tools or anything like that, but there's some basics that I think a lot of people should do. And I'd say the first one right off the bat is in your applicant tracking system, if you are not asking for permission to contact the candidates later in any sort of marketing capacity, go ahead and do that now. That is the biggest way to just ensure that you have a captive audience that you can remarket to. And when you look at that data, you want to just sort of look at how you can match that against your ATS. Make sure you have your data capture at the right points. There's going to be times where an application is more important than a job alert sign up or a talent community sign up. So that's why it's good that when you want them to apply, they also have the way to opt in easily to the network, so they don't have to sort of fill out two forms. And really, I think one of the best practices is, like I talked about with the employee referrals, tap into your existing leads before you do any external advertising. So, some recruiters will open up a new rec and forget about the 400 people that were on the past rec, or, people that we've already worked hard to attract. So definitely make sure you're marketing to the people that you've already acquired. I think another big thing is sort of junk in, junk out. You really want to make sure that data you do have the right data. And there's a balance. You don't want to ask candidates a million questions like their blood type just to make sure you can have the best data possible. But you do want to tie candidates to relevant job functions. So I know like a big catch-all job function at a lot of companies is corporate. Well, you work in corporate, but you could be in HR, you could be in legal, you could be in finance. So if you have a candidate labeled as corporate, it's not going to necessarily match them up with the best jobs, the best outreach, and things like that. So, you're going to want to do that. If you do have special initiatives, it may pay to identify who the veterans are. What are some of the special audiences? Is it college recruiting? College recruiting should be treated a lot separately because that audience is very transient. You are only in it for a short period of time. And then, when you have all of your data, you want to sort of match it up with the ATS to know, like, are they qualified? Is it hot or cold? If someone's a hire, let's not bother them anymore, because it's never a good look when you've hired someone and then sent them a new job. I know that this happens at some companies. Recruiting teams are just, overwhelmed, and they're just, throwing as many darts as they can out there. But, definitely understand that. And if someone's not hireable or not qualified, don't waste your time on them. Try to see if you can identify that in your data sets. And then, lastly, communicating effectively. So you got to send the right messages to the right candidates in the right context. Do not spam. If all you're doing is sending jobs, then it's not really a talent network or a talent community, because you want to offer something of value to this audience, and everybody's running around marketing a job, right? You need to give them a reason to think about the company differently. And to that end too, there are going to be times when you have special initiatives. Like I might have mentioned before on social media that we've done Twitter chats and things like that for clients. Well, if you want to advertise a Twitter chat, that your talent network or talent community is a great audience to tap into that you didn't have to buy. They're yours already. And I do also recommending to occasionally survey your audience, sort of learn about them, and really try to match the communications to them. So, these are sort of principles, all things aside, that other ways that you don't have to buy advertising, right? Like if you can turn your talent community into a viable source through nurturing it properly, you're not going to have to buy as much advertising. All right. So I know we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to just show you this AT&T example real quick, and we'll see how much time we have for questions. But so yeah, you know, I alluded to it earlier, but AT&T is one of our top clients, and sort of on these principles that I was giving you guys, coming up with your goals, developing the right marketing mix for you, and then applying that across the various candidate touch points and things they go through. If we were to look 5 years ago at AT&T, they were hiring around 25,000 people externally, and around 85% of that was all high volume hiring. And about 73% of that budget was going into media and advertising. So a lot of the money was being spent on major job boards, major job board contracts, big pay-per-click buys. There was also like this always-on advertising strategy. And, we did have a bit of strategy, brand, and technology at play, but it was mostly media. That was what we were doing. And fast forward to 2019, we've evolved. And I'm going to show you the results of that evolution over 5 years here in a second. But we're at a point now where actually most of the money in the marketing budget is not going towards media. It's going into strategy, brand, and technology. Things like I was showing you, making Taleo a much better user experience. Doing things like that makes us buy less media. So at a high level, if we look at their results, first of all, they've achieved all their hiring goals despite a 61% reduction in marketing budget from 2014 to 2019. So if any of you guys are familiar what's going on with AT&T, there's been a lot of mergers and a lot of cost cutting with those mergers. So some of the cost cutting was not our decision, but a lot of the strategic building was our decision. So all hiring goals have been achieved despite this. Now, when we look at the effectiveness of the marketing cost per hire, they actually saw a 29% improvement in their marketing cost per hire. And this was despite experiencing a rise in professional hiring. So, they're changing as an organization. They're hiring a lot less front of the line, hourly, high volume talent. So it's going to get more expensive to bring more data scientists and jobs like that in. And when we look at the marketing cost per hire, what's ironic about the current economic climate is, you could say, well, we should be making cases to leadership on why our marketing costs should go up because it's just that more difficult. But guess what? It's the opposite. This is the most efficient we've ever been, despite the external forces of the labor market. And lastly, from an app to hire ratio perspective, you can look at this as two ways. It's the recruiters utilizing more candidates, but also driving up candidate quality. It's improved by 53%. So we're getting less applications, but we're getting better applications, and more of those applications are being utilized and converted into hires. So big success with AT&T on taking a holistic approach. Like I said, these were examples of holistic things you can do. You're going to have to figure out what's right for you. But hopefully this gave you a little bit of insight into what the full spectrum of recruitment marketing really is, and how, it's not just buying pay-per-click ads. It's not just building a website. There's a lot more that goes into it, and just sort of a new way to look at it. So in summary, you define your goals based on your business needs. Like you're the closest to your business. You'll know what's right for the business. Really establish your recruitment marketing budget. Put some thought into that. Make sure you're funded correctly. If you have big holes that need to be plugged, you might need to make the business case to rebuild some of that. And your mix should be tied to your talent attraction goals. Like, do you not have enough candidates? Do you have too many candidates? If you have too many candidates, take a different approach than if you don't have enough candidates, or if you have a strong brand or a weaker brand. All of those things matter, and you really have to start applying that across the hiring cycle. And I know that's easier said than done. There's a lot of people that you don't always control those things, but it does take time, and it takes stakeholdering and partnering, but you can affect things that aren't always on your team. And then make sure you're measuring the impact your marketing mix is making. You have to measure it along the way. If not, how do you know what you're doing is even working? And lastly, it may not always stay the same. Every year, you got to be looking at things differently and where you're going, and make sure you're optimizing and adjusting. So I know we have about 5 minutes left, so I can take a couple questions real quick, and then if we run out of time, you can send those to wecanhelp@tmp.com. So if you do have questions, you should be able to chat them through the webinar, and I'll start answering them. All right, let's see. I have the first question. Do you have any recommendations for an organization that doesn't have a consumer brand to help boost visibility? I think I saw all that. So yeah, I mean, not having a consumer brand is definitely, a challenge, and I think in those cases, you probably need to look at what are the channels and avenues for you to do a bit of brand building. So, it's tough to just do job ads in that case, right? Because people aren't even looking for you, but you may need to do job ads because that might not be the only way to do it. So, I mean, I would recommend, especially if a consumer brand is changing, or developing, you sort of need to partner with the consumer brand folks. But I think it's a time to at least start maybe doing a little bit of research, understanding a little bit of where the employer brand is today, and then think of start maybe leveraging a little bit of content marketing to help at least authentically expressing that, and trying to build on the whole existing efforts you already have. But I think building your employer brand an objective and part of your ultimate goals would be a good start. All right, let's see what else I got. And yeah, I will get a copy of the presentation. A copy of the presentation will be sent out to everyone. And let's see. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading these questions through the back end. Yeah, I can't. I actually cannot read any more of the questions. But I definitely, if you guys, if I didn't get to answer your question, go ahead and send the email to wecanhelp@tmp.com, and we'll make sure to answer. I'll make sure to answer any questions I can. We'll get a copy of the presentation out to everyone, and I'd also just recommend having conversations with any of your TMP contacts about any of these topics if you'd like to talk more. Thanks, everybody.